we're sitting in the Hartman log cabin that they figured was built somewhere in the 1830s or 1840s by a name I did not write down on my paper. It's on a different paper over there. John Kenley Hartman, who bought it from his grandfather, who is a Revolutionary War veteran who's buried on the other side of the bridge out back. So that's, I was kind of into this before all of this. But I'd like to introduce Dave Ulman, our speaker and smart guy for the day. He has been a collector of these things for 30 years. He's been an exhibit designer for museums, including designing exhibits for the blind, with notebooks that they can read with Braille, which I find very impressive.
Here's an example of a touch tour you guys can look through.
A touch tour, and it's cleverly named. He's in conjunction with the Americans with Disability. He's also got a fabulous Facebook page that you can look at if you know to look under the ORV, the Ohio River Valley Collectors page. And all this stuff is the kind of thing he puts on his page so you can enjoy more of it. And on that, Dave, there is a guy named Dirk running around here someplace. I haven't seen him in a while. But that, Dave, it's yours. Thank you.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is a noble mind that suffers the slings and arrows of men, and I always forget it after that. But that's what this is about. This whole thing about the Adina Hopewell, all of these earthworks that have been made on the Little Miami River Valley, and some are a little bit around, but there's even more than what I have here. It's all about death. What happens after death? What do we have to do to get to what happens after death? I don't know, I think about the people that I know have died and how many graves that I actually know where the person is buried. It's probably 15 or so. I'm 65. I know where every one of my cats is buried. You know, I wonder in our childhood home if the people who own it now know they live on a cat graveyard. You know, I mean, we know these things are important to us. Sometime in the 350,000 years ago, the first human was on the plains in Africa, and he was sitting in a bush, and he was watching the lions eat a hippopotamus. And he's sitting there thinking about it, and he looks over and he sees hyenas. And he realizes, I'm not going to get to that hippopotamus before those hyenas. And that's when man invented standing in line. But he had to sit there and think, what am I doing here? You know, even the Neanderthals, 100,000 years ago in Europe, they're making cave paintings, talking about this, trying to figure out what's going on. And we just can't answer the question, you know? What is your concept of heaven? And I bet we could talk to everybody in here and they have a different concept. Is it the pearly gates? Is it blah, blah, blah? We all struggle with that. And a good question is, at what age, you know, were you? Were you 5 or 6 and you thought about heaven and trying to figure it all out, you know? Well, the Hopewell and the Adina Hopewell, and I say Hopewell, but Adina Hopewell is the same people. You know, it's often in the media that Hopewell or this or that, but they're the same people genetically, culturally, everything else. So if I say Hopewell, I mean Adina Hopewell. But they built these huge earthworks, all to provide for them a theater where they could put on ceremonies. And they had specific ideas about that. And when we think about the Native Americans, it's always a question of when did they come over here? You know, was it with Clovis? What's the deal? Well, there's a lot of stories that the Native Americans tell that are also told in Siberia. And one of those is about Turtle Island. And you might have heard that before. North America, the Native Americans call it Turtle Island. Well, it's a diver story, and the story goes is that the earth was covered in an ocean, and there was a turtle sitting there, and either a shoveler duck or a beaver, or the animals change, but the animal goes down, gets some mud, puts it on the back of the turtle, and that's how the continents were created. And you find those diver stories in Siberia and in America. So that just even shows more of a connection that we had with these things. The big concern about the Hopewell was birds and migration. A lot of these have alignments with the moons, and a lot of those are agricultural, when to plant and things like that. But the main concern was the migration of birds, because what they believed is that when someone died, and I'm saying this generally, not specifically about the Hopewell, because they were so long ago we don't know, but we have Algonquin stories, and we can kind of assume that the modern Algonquin stories, like the Shawnee and the Fort Ancient and the Miami Indians, are related to the Adena Hopewell, because it's the same genetic line and the same Algonquin culture. One of their beliefs is that after we die, our spirits will go up to the Milky Way galaxy, and that is a trail to the world beyond. Okay? Now, I specifically didn't use the word soul or heaven. Those are modern European terms for these things. And the Native Americans didn't think about the next world as heaven. You know, they thought about it as just the whole universe is divided up into three zones: the underworld, which is not hell, and the devil and all that kind of stuff. It's just the underworld where unborn spirits reside or something like that. There's our world, and there's the next world. And so they don't put all the heaven and things like that we put on it today. So what they're trying to do is have these big ceremonies where people can bring their dearly departed, and they can have a huge funeral fire, and that fire and the smoke will take them up to the migrating birds, who will then take the spirits to the trail of the Milky Way. And you know, that is a really joyous event. I mean, think about the people that you have known that have died, and isn't it some amount of comfort to know that they are off to a better place? And that's what these earthworks were about. We often say it's about death, and we talk about the graves and the bones and stuff, but it's more about the transition to the next world, and that's a really joyous event, you know? Here, I could pass these out as you guys for the, here, let me get some more here. I should have thought about this beforehand. For some reason, about 200 AD, the Adena culture flowered into the Hopewell. And we really don't know what triggered it, but before that, they were making conical mounds, and those were charnel houses, and probably clan or family mounds, and you know, they were living in hamlets of about 30 people and a family, and they were spread out amongst the landscape. Some reason Hopewell inspired them to start making all these earthworks. And one of the really interesting ones is the Turner earthworks, which I have down here. That's where the canoe livery is, down there by Newtown. Anybody familiar with that? Yeah. Okay, so you can see that right there when you get off the river and you look and you see it used to be a softball field, the canoe livery, and there's a railroad tracks behind it with a hill. You can see that they had a huge circle down there, as big as 2 football fields could fit into it. They had a ramp going up the hill with another huge circle on top of that. And here's kind of the schematics for it. And you go in here. This is the Milford earthworks, which you can't find anything before, but it's just so weirdly shaped, and it's got these weird shapes on them. This is the East Fork earthworks, and we're not really sure where this is, but if you look at these lines, that takes on the shape of a bird, and those are the feathers for it and everything. So the bird's very, very important. And the Hopewell, the first map that you see there is the Hopewell interaction sphere. And you can see all the exotic things that came from all over the country, and people brought them here to be buried. And the big debate is, was it a trade network or was it a pilgrimage? And we don't really have a good answer to that, but we know that if it was a trade network and there is obsidian from Yellowstone, then that means a Hopewell had to go get it, and he would take Ohio things to trade with them along the way. We don't find Ohio things in these other far places, you know, so that implies that it was a pilgrimage, you know, and what a pilgrimage to make. Well, the second page is, I'm going to talk about one of those pilgrimages. It's from a Swift Creek culture in Georgia, and one of these shards was found in the Turner Mounds and also in the Seep Mound. They have pottery from Georgia, and these are one of my favorite graphics. The one graphics on the right is a cardinal with its wings flapping, and just for an artist to be able to do that, they would make paddles that are down there, and then they would stamp that into their pottery, and then they've tracked these paddles were legacy paddles passed on from mother to daughter, and they've been able to track them for a couple hundred years at different Swift Creek campsites. So these paddles made once were very important, and the pottery was also very important. So somebody in Georgia stamped a pot, and we find that pot here in central Ohio. Well, what were the circumstances? I mean, why were people making it all coming up here? If we have a scenario where a Hamlet chief wife is pregnant and she dies during childbirth, and his wife and his daughter have just died, and the grief that he felt must just be overwhelming. They go through all the rituals that they think, and it kind of thinks like they have 2 spirits, one for a spirit and one for a bone spirit. So the spirit goes off to the trail, but then they've got this bone spirit hanging around, you know, so you got to deal with that. And so it's the springtime, and he's still upset. He hasn't dealt with it very much. And they're using Snyder's points, which you guys will find around here. That's this one here. It's a Hopewell point. It's very distinct, and that point was used all in these different societies all around the East. Why did they adopt that point? Why did somebody in Louisiana start using this point based on an Ohio point? Big question. Well, this chief, he's got to deal with that bone spirit. You know, he goes out to the cremation fire and he passes it every day, And he thinks about, oh, here you go.
That's okay.
Thinks about his wife and daughter, and he knows he has to do something still. So he decides he's going to go to the kingdom in the north and bury or free his bone spirits of his wife and daughter. Okay, he's in Georgia. If you turn to the last page, I got a map. If you like puzzles, figure out how he got from Georgia to Ohio. You know, there's a lot of rivers in there. It was not an easy trip. You can go by river, but he'd have to go down to the Gulf of Mexico, over to the Mississippi River, paddle up the Mississippi River, up the Ohio River, then up the Scioto River, and then he's there. How long does that take? He could go overland, but if you look at this map, this is a map of languages of the Native Americans before contact. And you can kind of see they're all kind of grouped together, you know. The Algonquins are living around us. The Iroquois are living up here. Well, this guy's in Georgia, and if he's going to walk, he's got to go up through Tennessee, Kentucky, and Ohio. And that's Algonquin, that's Yuchi, that's Cherokee. That's kind of, I mean, how many warriors do you need to get that far? You know, how much food do you need to pack? You know, that's a lot if you're walking. Even if you're paddling, you got to have somebody to paddle the canoes and everything. So they decide they finally make the trip. And what happens is they get to Portsmouth, Ohio. And in Portsmouth, there was a huge mound complex. There were what do you call it? Temple mounds. There's earthworks, everything. But they have to go to central Ohio, so they have to walk up the Scioto River and get to Newark or Chillicothe. And once they're at that place, I don't know if you've ever been there, there's the Great Circle or the Octagon Earthworks in Newark. You get there and you're just in awe of how big these things are. The Great Circle is 20, 30 feet high, and 2 or 3 football fields can fit in the middle of it, and it's just this huge circle, you know. And the Octagon Earthworks are a big circle and kind of a stop sign looking thing, and they're all aligned with the sun and the moon, and you know they predicted months and the seasons and all that kind of stuff. Really sophisticated mathematics for what these guys were doing. Well, our friends, the Swift Creek people, they finally get there. And now, I'm kind of just making a lot of this up from what I've read and everything because we don't really know. But from what I can figure out, what happened was they showed up in Newark at the Great Circle, and the people that were living there were preparing for a great ceremony. Because it was fall time, the birds are migrating. This is the time spirits are flying. So they have it prepared. They have feasts for people. They have a funerary area where they actually have little chapels carved out so that, you know, you can go and put your person there or whatever. Just their sophistication, their arrangements. I wish we knew more about that. What do we do from day 1 to day 5 to going through this thing? But somehow they go and they give the priests their bundles of bones from his wife and daughter. And the priests take that and they put it in a sacred spot. And then the time comes for the evening, and the Milky Way galaxy rises up in the sky. I mean, if you've ever been out west or you've seen the Milky Way, it's just incredible. They have a huge bonfire, and they do their chants, they sing, they have all kinds of ceremonies. Everybody is really into it. The smoke is rising up. The father's wife and daughter are free. He sees the Milky Way, and he knows that they're there going to a better place. And that's what these things are about. So I hope that when you find a Snyder's point or a piece of Flint Ridge flint, you realize that the ceremony that comes with these people and what those Snyder's points meant to them all. And that's a really cool thing if you find that in the field. Any questions? Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about the collage I made here. We've got the Turner earthworks here and a schematic, and then some of the other ones. Turner is a little bit different because I told you it's all about going to heaven and feeling good about everything. We're not really sure about Turner because these are effigies of underworld animals. And they're made up animals. They're not real animals. Because here's kind of a beaver with a rattlesnake tail and horns. We're not sure what these are, but these are kind of underworld kind of things. And these is what was found at Turner. So something different was going on there. These are some effigies of people that are from Turner, so you can see what they look like. And these line drawings are a little what do they call it? A diorama, where these little clay figures were arranged in a certain pattern, like reenacting a ceremony, and then the whole thing was burned. You know, so here's some of the people that were in that little ceremony, and you can see some over here are just some general Hopewell artifacts and some maps. This is the map of Hopewell around here, but this one here shows all over the eastern United States, all these little cultures. They weren't Hopewell, but they used Snyder's points and they had some affiliation. You know, they had different languages. We don't know what's going on with them. Well, in the Little Miami River Valley, which all the Indians around here, whenever you find something, they think Little Miami River Valley. That's where the big Hopewell things were. And then at later times, about 1000 AD, and after that, the Fort Ancient people were here, and Marymount Swim Club was the Madisonville site. And here is some things from the Madisonville site. And I put this on here because this is the most interesting thing, I think, is this pedestaled pot, because it's a Native American pot, but it seems to be made to look like the chalice of Marquette. That's the French priest that traveled through the Lake Huron and the Great Lakes, proselytizing, converting people to Christianity. They would basically just put on their frock, grab their chalice, and take a canoe and go out and find people to convert to Christianity. So pretty brave, you know, they didn't even know anything about them. But apparently what's going on here, the Madisonville site, nobody really knew about it because it was gone before the pioneers got here and everything, so we discovered it. But what we find out is they have European goods. They have these snakes, these little wires that are Basque bronze. Basque is in northern Spain. Somehow they got these things here in Marymount. But what's going on with this pot is they think that a Wyandot priest or a Wyandot medicine man came down here after the Beaver Wars, because you can see this map here, the New York Iroquois ran out of beaver pelts, and it gets a little bit deeper than this with, you know, all the diseases and everything else. But basically the Iroquois just started invading and rampaging through Michigan, Ohio, all the way over to Illinois. The Wyandot tribe took the brunt of it. And so what we think is that the timeline here is that a French priest proselytized, had Catholic Mass with him. The Wyandot medicine man came down to Madisonville site, had somebody make him a pedestaled pot, and did he perform some kind of quasi-Catholic Mass, you know? I don't know if any of you are Catholic in here, but what happens, and I have a little thing here, during a Catholic Mass is that the bread that is on the altar is, I can't think of the word of it. It's converted into the actual body and blood of Christ, and that's a very solemn moment for the Catholics. This guy in Madisonville, was he trying to do the same ceremony? And I think that's a really interesting question. So there's some different things about Madisonville points. So this is the Fort Ancient Point, the triangles. These were true arrow points. And these are the Snyder points. This comes from the time of the Atto. And we didn't even talk about the end of Hopewell. That's a whole another story. But 500 AD, Hopewell disappears. And that's a mystery that we'll have to talk about some more. So I'd like to talk about the arrowheads and collecting. You can see that I have a lot of frames that I put together. And for you guys collecting, I kind of give an idea of how I collect. And one of the best things I have is this little pencil artist table or cabinet. It's great for putting arrowheads in, and I can take them out and do projects and stuff like that. Something if you get into my Facebook group, something I usually don't do is identify artifacts. I know this is Artifact ID Day, but I rarely tell people what the point is. And that's just because I've learned that if they disagree with me, well, then we're into an argument, which is a good debate. I like those debates. But I find it's much better if I tell them how to identify it, and then they can do it themselves. Thanks. I love that when I do that and somebody comes back with, "What are you talking about?" You know, it's like I love the debate. But I'll talk a lot about that today. And the best website is the projectilepoints.net. It works better if you have a computer, but you can do it on your phone. And the way that I like to have it happen is that somebody goes here and tries and figures out what they got. And they'll be 2 or 3, and they'll get a headache and everything. Then they come to me and they say, "I think it's this because of this, this, and this." And I can say, "Oh, you're so observant. You are so correct." Or I can say, "Wait a minute, check out this part," or that's a really good conversation for me to have. I hate it when I just go, "It's a Kirk corner notch," and then you never hear anything from them again. But having a little talk about what it is and the patterns of it and everything is really neat. How much more time do I have to talk?
Oh, it's up to you.
It's only been a half hour. Okay, well, what I'd like to do is kind of give you an idea about what I do with those arrowheads. How to look at stuff. If you have an arrowhead or an artifact, take it out and hold it. And I had some extras. Did anybody see?
They had a baggie?
Yeah.
They're down there.
Oh, that's so I could hand them out and If you don't have arrowheads, I'll tell you what, why don't you take one of mine? Does anybody need an arrowhead? Do you have one? Yeah. Just take one out of there and pass it on.
So I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
So, knowing that waterways change in size and stuff, is it possible that the Swifts could have taken like creeks and stuff that went into that dumped into the river, and at the time the river wasn't as big as it was today?
Oh yeah, because there was, the stuff we have today is all managed. The Ohio rivers, you know, so it was all over the place. Every time it flooded, it changed. And so that's how you get artifacts in the creek. They didn't leave them in the creek. They're washed out of when the things change and
Just
stuff.
thinking of like how he got from like Georgia up to like Ohio. Possibly it was like just like the various different waterways that maybe dried up and stuff too.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Does everybody have an arrowhead? Okay. I'd like you to take that arrowhead in your hand, and I'd like everybody to close their eyes. I learned this when I was given a touch tour for blind people, and I was surprised how much they were telling me about the stuff. And so I always tell people to do this in my group all the time. So I'd like everybody to close their eyes and feel the arrowhead and the edges with your fingers. You can feel the sharp points and the dull spots. You can feel the flake scars on it. I have to kind of tell you, I'm kind of having a little bit of a crisis here. You ever have a dream like where you're trying to go someplace and you can't move your feet? You know, you're at school. Mine is that I give a talk and everybody falls asleep. So snoring, no, okay?
They're all feeling their arrowhead.
That's right. So you can tell the sharp and the dull spots. Right? The dull spots has been used. Every time you cut with or scrape with a flint artifact, a little bit of that is lost. A little bit of it is left with whatever you're cutting. So you can reverse engineer your artifact and see how they used it. Okay? The sharp points, either they resharpened it lately or they just didn't use that part of the knife. Think about how you use your kitchen knives. You know, if you're going to cut a head of lettuce, you slice back and forth, you get the whole head in there. But if you're going to cut carrots, you use just the bottom part and get that leverage in there. You can tell how they used it like that. You can also look at the flaking patterns, and you can see that usually when they just get a perfect arrowhead and they just made it, they have random flakes all over the surface of it to get it to that shape, and then they flint knap just the edges of it with little flake scars and make it nice and sharp. But then they're out there skinning a deer or cutting down a tree or whatever they're doing. It gets dull. They have to resharpen it. So they have to get a deer antler or something, and they don't have time. So they make these big flake scars to sharpen it up. So you can kind of tell the difference. We can really analyze how they used it, what they were using it for. There's even studies now where they're able to get into the little crevices of the flint and get blood DNA from the arrowheads and stuff like that. So science is just amazing. Typically, when I'm identifying stuff, I just have Post-it notes and I tape it. You know, because at some point I'm going to want to make a frame, but identifying it is the first part, because then I can read about the culture and the history and time and everything else. And that's what these little things are for, that are just great, because everything's just organized right in there and everything. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to sit over here and you can bring stuff up. And these gentlemen are from Archaeological Research Institute. I always say ARI. Would you like to, Louis, tell us a little bit about your organization?
Yeah. So my name is Louis Hersner. This is Sam Litton. Then we got Kurt, Larry, Dan, and Braden. We're with the Archaeological Research Institute. We're based out of Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and we're public archaeologists. So we work with a little bit of everybody to help bring, what we find, the history and the artifacts, and archaeology to the forefront. Believe that archaeology and history belong to all of us, and it always hasn't been shared with everybody. So that's what we do, is work together to help understand the history, our cultural resources, and the timeline of history through here.
And they do some great stuff. They have a headquarters down in Lawrenceburg, which is just incredible. I mean, you walk in, and of course there's a really nice gift shop in their offices, but then you walk down this ramp, you know, and it's like walking into the Smithsonian Institution or something. You go down there into this room, and they've got all this archaeological stuff, and then in the next room they have experiments going on, and you guys do some of the greatest events. I love the trebuchet pumpkin.
Oh yes, yeah.
You know what a trebuchet is from like Europe, when they had that catapult that, and they put pumpkins in it, and I don't know, who's the reigning trebuchet pumpkin champ?
Yeah. So it's really difficult to advertise today. You know, there's so many media outlets. You know, back in the day it was newspapers, TV, and radio. You could advertise for everything, but there are so many podcasts and streaming services. It's really difficult to, you know, get people interested or to advertise about ARI. And so we're like, well, what can we do to bring more people in? And Larry and I were sitting around talking around. I was like, I think it was, the conversation went like this. Hey Larry, I got a cockamamie idea. And it's like, what if we built a trebuchet? What if we built a trebuchet to do a hands-on history event to get people in to really start thinking about history? So we built one. It's about 20 feet tall, and in the basket we have 980 pounds to fling a pumpkin, and we're throwing it about a football field in length. So the first year we had 350 people, and we're like, yeah, this is a success. So we get people out, and some of those people come to ARI, so that's great. So we're like, let's do it bigger next year. So we got some flint knappers out there. We got more people doing things, and we had 1,500 people come through last year. Wow. So it's the first Saturday in November. It's over at Carriage House Farms in North Bend, Ohio, not too far from where we are. And it's also the Mount Nebo site. If you know the Mount Nebo site, it's right there at the Mount Nebo site. And so we're hoping to shatter that record of 1,500 people. Come out, we're gonna have more flint knapping, do some ceramics, do some atto throwing, throw some pumpkins. We also built a ballista this year, so we can throw smaller pumpkins with this medieval, fully mobile crossbow, which is pretty cool. But also a lot of educational stuff for people.
Oh yeah, the Midwest Archaeology podcast is the best I've listened to. I've listened to every one of those, and the interviewer, Strange, Lee Strange is and he interviewed the guy that has the most recent Cahokia archaeologist and the biggest theories about that, and it's an hour long, and the questions and everything. He has a couple on Fort Ancient with the archaeologists from the museum center and everything, and I just listened to him, and I'm just like, wait a minute, you got to ask this question, and then Lee asked that question, you know. And then so that's really good. ARI just does so many great stuff and events. You can join the organization and get updated on it, and anytime I see it, I put it in the ORV group, because I just want people to go down there and do that stuff and everything.
We have something going on. Yes, man.
I want you to say your name again, so I got it.
Yeah, it's Louis. My name is Louis, Louis Herzner, Herzner. And this is Sam Linton. And Sam Linton helps in our experimental archaeology department. And then Kurt Beveridge is a member of our Veterans Archaeological Learning Opportunities and Research program, so our Veterans Archaeology program. Larry Sandman is our editor of our magazine, which we have some for you to take today. And then Dan is in our field school, so learning to be an archaeologist. And Braden has been a collector for a long time, an avocational archaeologist. Came to our field school to learn to do archaeology, and has been helping us with archaeology as well as experimental archaeology for about the last 2 years.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you did that. Now, what's the name of the organization?
So it's the Archaeological Research Institute. So in archaeology, there's many different ways to do archaeology. You have academic archaeology, so the people in the universities teaching the classes on archaeology. Then you have your cultural resource archaeologists, the people that are doing the works on the side of the road when the highway projects are being done, or if there's a big company that's coming in to break ground, they'll go in there to make sure that they're not destroying any sites, or at least what those sites are prior to the building. And then you have public archaeologists, and we're probably the smallest group of archaeologists in archaeology. In fact, ARI is one of 10 public archaeology groups in America that are recognized by the Society for American Archaeology, and we're the only one in this region. We do it a little bit differently because we started organically. So a lot of them started and saw it, and then they're like, we want to be like you, and they kind of mimicked their plan. We started organically from a collector who was really interested in the archaeology, really interested in preserving sites. So he had the opportunity to buy the guard site, which is the land that the guard site is on. So it's an 800 to 1,000-year-old Fort Ancient village. So these are some of the very first corn farmers in this area. Some of the very first full-time settlements in the area. And ours is at the mouth of the Great Miami in the floodplain, and because of that, it's been really well preserved by the silts that have come in the floods. And because of that, having a site that we're able to steward and research has been really incredible. And so we've been able to do things a little bit different than some of these other organizations, like run field school. So we run 2 field school sessions, and I've been there since 2019, and we've trained over 100 new archaeologists that go into the field, looking at, with our ethics, looking with the open mind of we can work with people to better tell the story of the history of the archaeology.
Okay, well, I'll finish up here. My group is the ORV, Ohio River Valley Arrowhead Collectors, and if you're not part of that, please join. And I want to tell you what my goal in this group is that all you folks are collectors, and you pick up these rocks, and what is it? With the conversations and the articles that I put up there, my goal is to have the people in that group be able to walk in a field and pick up a Brewerton point, and they know, okay, Brewerton. And then they look around and they see a landscape that comes from 3000 BC. You know, they know in their minds this is what the environment was like. It was wooded. There were people all over the place. And then they walk a little bit further and they find a Clovis point. And like that'll ever happen, but they find a Clovis point, and I want people to look up and think, where the heck is that glacier? You know, this area is so uniquely glacier that it's pretty amazing. But I want people to think this was tundra 12, 13,000 years ago, and it was grassland and there were mammoth, but it was really cold, and there were huge dust storms that were just taking over the landscape. If you've ever seen Phoenix, like when it gets hit with that dust storm that comes through the desert, it's just a big wall of dust moving across the place. That's what they were dealing with. And I want people in my group to have that diversity of being able to see what they pick up and envision what it was the last person that held that artifact in their hand, what they were dealing with. And that's my goal of the ORV. So let's look at some artifacts. Yeah. Thank you. That does too. Look at the different blades on that.
There's mosses and stuff.
Boy, look how rough that is. You know, isn't that really different from the one you have in the see how finely they did those little marks?
Yeah, that was, I can tell that you said bigger chips were the sharks there.
Yeah.
I can tell that was barely ever.
Well, look, this has got that simple stem, right? Like the other one. So they were using river cane and Tennessee too.
Okay.
Right? But in between, are these all from one site or just collected around?
I'm not sure.
Oh, that's right, because it was your
Yes, he used to go out with his friends and go to creeks all over and collect
Some from the
arrowheads.
Red River Gorge, I know for sure.
Well, see, this is how I take care of it. I look at
Things that you recognize as seabirds.
I used to go with him when he would go creeking, so I don't remember which one it was.
It's a great personal collection. There's so much history in here that it depends on where you want to go.